Was the British Empire bankrupted by greed? It's a powerful thought. The empire built on a relentless hunger for wealth, ultimately crumbling under its own moral corruption. But the real story is more complex, more ironic. While greed was absolutely the engine that built the empire on which the sun never sets, its downfall wasn't a simple case of moral bankruptcy. It was a story of being bankrupted by the very act of defending its existence. Let's explore this. First, we have to acknowledge how greed constructed this global behemoth. For centuries, the British Empire was a ruthlessly profitable enterprise. Take the East India Company, for example. It wasn't just a company, it was a state-sponsored corporate raider with its own army. Its greed was legendary. After the Battle of Plassey in 1757, the company looted the treasury of Bengal. The sheer amount of wealth stolen was so immense it jump-started Britain's Industrial Revolution. Think about that for a second. The wealth of an entire nation carted off to London. Then there were the Opium Wars. Britain had a problem. It loved Chinese tea, but China didn't want British goods, creating a massive trade deficit. The solution? The East India Company started illegally smuggling opium grown in India into China. They deliberately created millions of addicts just to force a trade balance in their favor. When China tried to stop the drug trade, Britain declared war twice to protect its right to sell drugs. This wasn't just business. It was state-sanctioned narco-trafficking on an industrial scale. On top of this, the company imposed brutal tax systems on Indian farmers. They demanded cash payments even during devastating famines, which led to the deaths of millions. All while the profits kept flowing back to shareholders in London. Greed wasn't a byproduct of the empire, it was the blueprint. And let's not forget the Atlantic slave trade. The unimaginable wealth generated by trafficking over 3 million Africans was a cornerstone of Britain's economic might. The sugar, tobacco, and cotton produced by enslaved people in the Caribbean and Americas fueled the Industrial Revolution. Great British cities like Liverpool, Bristol, and London were literally built on the profits of human suffering. The entire triangular trade was a monument to greed. Later, in the late 19th century, came the scramble for Africa. This was a mad dash for raw materials, gold, diamonds, rubber, to feed the new industrial factories. Men like Cecil Rhodes embodied this spirit. He once said, "I contend that we are the first race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race." This was a self-serving justification for conquest, driven by a desire for personal fortune and imperial glory. For over 200 years, the empire was a global extraction machine. Greed made Britain the richest country and the financial capital of the world. No question. So, if the empire was so profitable, what went wrong? How did this cash cow become a colossal financial liability? This brings us to the second part of our story. What actually bankrupted the empire? The simple answer is that the cost of maintaining and defending this vast, sprawling territory eventually became unsustainable. Think about it. An empire needs a massive military. The Royal Navy, the largest in the world, was incredibly expensive to maintain, but it was a price Britain was willing to pay to control the seas and protect its trade routes. Furthermore, as nationalist movements grew in the colonies, the costs of suppressing them skyrocketed. Putting down the Indian Rebellion of 1857, fighting the Boer Wars in South Africa, and later dealing with insurgencies in Kenya and Palestine were a constant, bloody drain on the treasury. The empire was getting expensive, but the single biggest factor, the event that truly broke the bank, was the two world wars. The empire didn't go bankrupt. It was bankrupted saving itself and the world. World War I left Britain victorious but deeply in debt, especially to the United States. It had essentially mortgaged the empire to pay for the war. World War II was the final, fatal blow. For a full year, Britain and its empire stood virtually alone against Nazi Germany, pouring every last penny into the war effort. By the time it was over, the country was completely broke. The Lend-Lease program from the US was essentially a lifeline of credit that kept Britain afloat. In a telling sign of the times to secure American aid, Britain had to agree to share its military and technological secrets, effectively handing over the keys of global power to the United States. The master was now the debtor. Parallel to this financial collapse was a moral and political one. The ideals Britain fought for in World War II, freedom, self-determination, democracy, made its own empire look hypocritical. How could you fight against tyranny in Europe while denying freedom to millions in Asia and Africa? The moral authority was gone. After the war, a shattered and bankrupt Britain simply couldn't afford to fight independence movements across the globe. In India, the jewel in the crown, the choice was simple: grant independence or face a bloody, unwinnable, and unaffordable war. The pragmatic choice was decolonization. As Prime Minister Harold Macmillan famously said in his 1960 Wind of Change speech, the forces of nationalism were unstoppable. The final humiliation came in 1956 with the Suez Crisis. When Britain, along with France and Israel, invaded Egypt to retake control of the Suez Canal, the United States delivered an ultimatum. President Eisenhower threatened to sell off America's holdings of British bonds, which would have instantly crashed the British economy. Britain was forced into a humiliating withdrawal. The message was clear: Britain was no longer a world superpower. It couldn't make a major move without American approval. The imperial age was definitively over. So, let's return to our original question. Did greed bankrupt the British Empire? In a metaphorical sense, absolutely. The moral bankruptcy born from centuries of exploitation and greed created the very resistance that sought to tear the empire down. But in a literal, financial sense, the answer is no. The empire was financially destroyed by the astronomical cost of the two world wars. Wars fought to defend that very empire from other aggressive powers. Here's the ultimate irony. The immense wealth and global power that greed had built is precisely what positioned Britain to lead the fight against tyranny in the 20th century. But that fight, that heroic world-saving effort, is what ultimately bankrupted the nation and dismantled the empire. It's like using the spoils of a heist to build a magnificent mansion, only to have to take out a mortgage so massive to save it from a fire that you end up losing the house anyway. The legacy of the British Empire is a tangled web of creation and destruction, where the seeds of its downfall were sown in its greatest triumphs. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time.